Welcome to the Optimize Podcast, brought to you by VisibleThread. The Optimize Podcast is your go-to source for expert insights on bidding, business development, proposal management, and work-winning strategy. Each series is hosted by an expert in the field, bringing their unique experience and perspectives to every episode. We're excited to welcome Matt Light as the host of this series. With 15 years experience across every bidding role, from bid writer to bid director, Matt has built and led high-performing commercial teams, shaping work-winning strategies for healthcare and logistics businesses across the UK and Europe, and delivering an 80% plus win rate in public and private sector bids. An active member of APMP UK chapter, Deputy CEO, 40 Under 40 awardee, and one of the inaugural cohort of the Leadership Academy, Matt is committed to using his spare time to elevate the bidding profession, helping reframe it as a high-value strategic discipline, recognised for supporting organisations to unlock commercial value and growth. Now he's bringing that experience to the podcast, exploring the people, strategies and ideas shaping the future of bidding, and how organisations can turn work winning into true strategic advantage. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe wherever you're listening. Now, let's hear from Matt.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Optimize podcast brought to you by VisibleThread. This is Series 5. I'm Matt Light and I'm joined today by Elizabeth Hibbert, who's the proposal writer at CGI. Hi Elizabeth.
Hi Matt, how are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
No problem at all. So we're going to have a really great conversation today, all about the world of bid and proposal writing and really the strategic nature of the role behind that. Elizabeth's a great person to talk to us about this. So Elizabeth's worked in, account management, BD, advertising facing roles before moving into being a self-employed writer for 15 years and then moving into the bid writing profession with CGI. She's also got a really strong academic background as well, having studied PPE at Oxford. So Elizabeth's got some great experience to be able to talk to us about how bid and proposal writing is positioned, particularly with that experience having been freelance and now being a really big organisation in CGI. I mean, Elizabeth, just to start us off, in terms of the freelance self-employed writing that you did for over 15 years, you worked for a wide range of businesses and in a wide range of sectors, didn't you? Walk us through a bit of that really quickly.
Yeah, so when I started out as a freelancer, my mission really was to work with small local businesses where I live in Epsom, because I just felt really passionate about sort of helping small businesses and their owners put their businesses into words to attract customers, because I knew that's something that a lot of people struggled with. So right from the beginning, I went to a couple of networking groups and I offered to do some writing for free just so I could build up a small portfolio and also understand whether it's something I wanted to carry on doing. And back then I worked, helped a photographer, a makeup artist, and gradually sort of started to work with slightly bigger businesses over time. And literally everything from window companies to larger solar panels companies, even funeral homes, which wasn't necessarily the highlight. I worked for a graduate recruitment portal, writing student-facing copy and blogs for a couple of years. And then over the years, I guess the kind of content I was writing changed, and went from writing a lot of websites and blogs and that sort of thing through to when LinkedIn started becoming even more important for business owners, ghostwriting on behalf of business owners, CEOs and senior executives, and basically managing their LinkedIn accounts.
Wow.
So it was a huge amount of sort of ghostwriting, articles, thought leadership, that kind of thing was creeping in as well. So yeah, as you say, a variety of industries, but also a variety of types of writing.
That's a fantastic amount of experience. What a really, yeah, I was going to say what a really great grounding for proposal writing, but I think it's even more than that. Gosh. So with all that experience then, Elizabeth, and the skills that you picked up during that time, then coming into doing bid and proposal writing, which skills do you think transferred across the best, and which skills from your freelance writing time do you still use today?
So I'd say the biggest skill was really about understanding the customer, and that focus. So I'm always sort of banging that drum, if you like. When I was working with businesses, it's the questioning. I didn't understand anything about these particular industries before I started working with them. I mean, I remember one of the clients I had was in freight and logistics, and very niche. I knew nothing about it at all. So in order to write about it, I had to ask lots and lots of questions and really have a very detailed and effective briefing process. And I think I brought that over into how I do storyboarding. And that's sort of quite a big passion of mine, is if we don't ask the right questions up front, we're not going to get the best output at the end of it. I mean, that was also something that I learned through working in advertising and marketing previously, because it was all about the brief from the client that produced the quality in the end. If you just start writing without asking those questions and without that context, then you're never going to get it right. So I would say it's probably the biggest, the customer, sort of the empathy, the understanding the customer, the helping these businesses understand their own customers, and then giving that to me for me to write about, was probably the most important transferable skill I bought, I think.
That's really, really great. It's interesting that you mentioned freight and logistics there, because I worked in that world for a tiny portion of my career, and it was, like you say, a really kind of niche sort of business. So much so that the bid team that we had in that organisation, they didn't have anybody but bid writers, and their view was just that tenders got handed over to the bid writers, and the bid writers just wrote them, and then they were submitted. And I guess you and I and everyone else listening will probably feel that frustration. We've probably been in those kind of scenarios where we know that that's not really kind of how it works. From your point of view, what do you think that people and organisations misunderstand, or what's the biggest misconception when people hear the term bid writer or proposal writer?
I mean, it's quite difficult to talk about other people, because I guess from my perception, when I was considering moving into sort of bids, I thought there'd be even more writing than there actually is. I think that the misperception I had was that I would be spending all day, every day writing.
Yeah.
And I spend a lot of time researching, talking to people, in workshops, in meetings, collaborating, supporting other people. So there's a lot more to the writing role, even though the core of it is writing and the output is writing. And what goes into that is a lot more. And if you, as I say, if you went straight into writing without doing anything else, you would not be winning any bids, I don't think. So I think that was probably a perception I had, and I was quite surprised when I joined CGI just how collaborative it all is, how many meetings that there are that go into ultimately creating that written proposal. I think that could be a perception that's out there as well, that it could be perceived as a bit lonely because you're a writer, that maybe you work constantly on your own, and that might still be the case in some organisations. It's certainly not where I work. And that also it's just purely focused on the written word only, and sort of editing, avoiding typos, making sure things sound and read right, when it's actually much, much more than that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. So I think you touched upon it a little bit here, but bid writers, proposal writers can bring so much more value to an organisation than just writing. if an organisation is approaching it that way, give us a little bit more detail if you can about what value gets lost by taking that approach. What are organisations kind of leaving on the table by just letting their bid writers do bid writing?
I think it's the kind of big picture and the bird's eye view. Sometimes it's the starting from an earlier point in the process. So, writers are generally good researchers, because that sort of goes hand in hand with it, and good listeners and communicators, because you need all of that input. So writers really should be involved much earlier in the process, at capture stage, researching, looking at the stakeholders, analysis of those stakeholders, understanding the client's pain points, what they're looking for, and really analysing the questions in the bid. What do they mean? What lies behind them? What does this show about the customer and what they're thinking, feeling, worrying about? So there's a whole massive piece of work that the writer can do and should do before you even get to put any pen on paper. There's also looking at the structure, the approach, the win themes, the overarching story. What do we actually want to get across? How are we going to win this? And challenging as well, I think, some working in that sort of challenging role, in terms of, if, for example, it comes out of a workshop that the client is going to decide on price. Do we challenge that? Do we know that for sure? How do we know that? What if we're wrong and we go all in on a sort of, value for money concept when they're actually looking for something else? And how do we sort of test that? How do we present alternatives to that? And if that is the case, how do we actually manage that through our story? There's definitely a lot more of a strategic role for the writer than just purely the written word that comes out the end. That's almost sort of maybe the third of it, rather than the entirety of it for me. Yeah,
and I find that really interesting. Kind of reflect back on, you said at the beginning, you studied at Oxford, and those of us, whether it was sixth form or university or whatever it might have been, when we write those projects and those theses and things like that, we would do the research up front, wouldn't we, before we then start writing about stuff. So it's weird then that when we come into an organisation as bid people, we don't tend to follow that same approach. I think that's a really good call out. So we're going to now dive into a bit more detail around that, and get your views now on three key things, really. Why the bid writer's input really matters before the bid starts, as we've already kind of touched on there. I'm going to talk around understanding evaluators and best practice techniques and other things that bid and proposal writers can do to help score highly. And then we're going to talk about what the future of bid writing looks like as a strategic pillar of the profession. So if we focus in on that first bit then, and let's dive a bit more into the input that bid writers can have throughout the process. So you've mentioned capture already, and you've mentioned the solutioning stage, and you've alluded to this, I think, a little bit. Just give us some more detail on if writers are involved earlier in those parts of the process, they have the ability to storyboard. What better impact does that have then on actually the way in which you can write a proposal when it lands?
So I think, there could be a tendency to look at a question and say, right, we'll just start writing about that subject of that question.
Yeah.
And obviously, if you do that, then you're not necessarily addressing so much the client's needs and what your company's story is and how you might potentially win. So taking a much further back step, all that kind of research right at the beginning, really deep diving into that organisation's issues, reading the documents, looking at their strategy, looking at the wider picture. Are they in the news for anything good or bad? Getting a whole kind of bird's eye view of that organisation equips the writer to do a better job in the end and coach the team as well on those things. Obviously, you work with SMEs who are experts in their particular technical field, but I think there's the other side of it, which you can then add. It's also helping shape the whole sort of narrative in terms of, okay, what does the client think of us now? How can we change that? How can we improve that? How do we address those things? Looking at the competitor landscape, what do we need to, how do we stand out? How do we differentiate ourselves? What might they say? What do we need to say instead or above and beyond? So there's that whole kind of research and understanding, which then you can translate into sort of key messages. And then alongside all the technical responses, make sure you're weaving those in. So right at that beginning, and that's really what the storyboards are there to capture. So you've obviously got in theory, you've got your capture plan with a lot of that information in. And then the storyboard helps with each individual question. What's the client story here behind this particular question? How do we break it down to get the marks? Using all this information that's gone before. So obviously, if you ignore all of the things I've just said and just start writing it, then that's not good either, and that's obviously a waste of everybody's time. And that's not to say that it's not a huge challenge, because sometimes the questions are so technical and you have to get across very specific things in a small page count, which might not leave much space or room for getting across your powerful story or differentiators and your discriminators and all the great things we know we should get in. And I think that's probably the most common challenge for everybody. But sometimes there can be subtle ways of weaving those things in, and if you haven't got them to hand, then you won't do it. So I think that upfront work is just absolutely crucial.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'd like to pick up on the research piece a little bit. So if I was a bid writer sat in an organisation and I'd not been involved in the research side of things before, and I'd not pushed myself into those kind of capture elements, what would be your suggestions in terms of where to start with doing research on an organisation that you might be submitting a bid into, Elizabeth? Like where would I go? Where would you point me to?
I mean, obviously now we do have AI tools which can do this quite quickly for you, but then you still need to ask them the right questions. Pre having AI, if you like, starting with the organisation, looking at their IT strategy, or for us it would be their sort of IT or digital strategy. For other people it might be their social housing strategy or whatever is relevant to their industry. Looking them up in the news, has there been any kind of news stories? And obviously understanding what they do as an organisation, what their aims and objectives, issues are. Then obviously there's the kind of stakeholder piece, understanding who the evaluator might be, and who the key stakeholders are and what matters to them. And to do that, they may have written articles, they may have been interviewed on podcasts, they may have LinkedIn profiles that they are vocal on those and express their opinions or write about certain things. Obviously, if you have, in theory, this would be the case, that you would have somebody in the organisation in sales who's close to that organisation that they should be feeding into the process, so making sure they're involved or that they are talking to them, that you're getting their input and their insights as well. And yeah, so now we've got AI tools, they could probably bring a lot of this into one place rather than having to yourself research in lots of different places. But a very, getting some really good detailed understanding of what this bid means to that client and what they are looking for in a supplier will help you along the right track to start with.
No, that's fantastic. Really good advice. Thank you. You mentioned about the evaluators there. Let's dive into that a little bit. So we as bid people, I guess, think that we know evaluators, in general terms, we know that they're going to have numerous proposals on their desk to read through, and how they read them, how much detail they read them in, I guess might be a little bit up for debate. So when you talk about, you've got to know your evaluators and you've got to write to them, how do we do that? What makes a bid genuinely memorable to an evaluator, and how do they separate out responses that simply written to answer the question from one that actually enables them to score it highly against the evaluation criteria?
Yeah, there's some general good principles, and there's obviously tailored to each bid as well. So at a recent talk I did, I called it the evaluator's desk. And I tried to show in that, let's think of the evaluator as a human being, that they're busy, they've got, we're under deadlines, but they may well be under deadlines as well to make the decisions and score everything. They are human beings with stresses of daily life. And so, yes, they may well be skimming it. They may be given sections. They may be given the whole bid to read. You don't know whether the evaluator in any particular question is looking at the bid end to end, whether they're just given one piece. So you almost have to kind of basically optimize what you're writing for every eventuality, which is obviously really, really hard unless you have a very strong coach and understanding of that client already, where they tell you how they're going to evaluate it. I would say most of the time you wouldn't know that. So you probably do need to approach it with each individual question, assume that person's only reading that, and they haven't seen a great thing you said in question 8. They're only looking at question 7. So make sure everything is all encompassing where you can. But in terms of general principles, making sure that it's not a big block of text that's just written about a topic, that it's broken down in line with how the question is asked. Things like using the client's language is always a good principle. Obviously, respecting their kind of how they talk about themselves as an organization, if they refer to themselves by a particular name or the authority or however they do it, is using that kind of language to make it easy for them so they haven't got to kind of extrapolate anything. Signposting, headings. So again, thinking of them skimming something, you want them to be able to tick off, yes, they've covered that. So if you're expecting them to trawl through and find it, they may not. So it kind of benefits you and it benefits the evaluator, and that's the way to think of it. So structure is very, very important. Obviously, the content is very important. And in terms of tailoring it, obviously, if you know through your stakeholder analysis, capture and everything you know about the client, that the particular stakeholder is most worried about one thing, the risk of transition or cost or whatever that thing is making sure that you're clearly addressing and reinforcing those messages. Otherwise, it's a wasted opportunity not to actually get across what that person cares about.
Yeah. Do you think, we're going to talk a little bit about AI in bid writing in a minute, but do you think from an evaluator perspective, Elizabeth, if they start to use AI in evaluations, which we kind of get the feeling that some people might start to be doing, do you think the structure and the content bit then becomes even more important if an AI is scanning through and has been taught how to evaluate?
I think this is something that will take a lot more learning and exploration over time, because I suspect, yes, you're right, some are probably doing that already, but we know that AI is very good at trawling to find the information. So if an AI tool is trawling a wall of text, they will find what you're saying, unlike a human who maybe has to concentrate a lot more and read it really carefully to find that. So in that sense, maybe your signposting, etc., will be less important. But having said that, it may well be skimming for keywords. So understanding what the client is looking for. If the most important thing to them in the world is value for money, then obviously value for money needs to come across loud and clear for AI to almost be able to report back on a high score. So I think it's two things really. And I think as AI tools become more sophisticated, it remains to be seen what will become most important. You would hope, though, that maybe the AI tool would be almost ticking off the requirements. They have met the requirements, but then it would go to the human evaluator for the differentiation part between, say, 3 companies have all met their requirements. What's the story on top? And that's where your differentiating, your win themes, all of that become even more important than maybe they do now. So, yeah, there's maybe 2 ways of looking at that.
Yeah, I would hope that evaluators or organisations would keep their human evaluator in the loop as well, because like you say, otherwise some of that differentiation gets lost, doesn't it? So when we're putting a response together as a bid or proposal writer, I think of some of the bids that people listening will probably be dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And you mentioned earlier some of those really complex kind of questions where they might be page counted or word counted. It's not actually one question, it's several questions all in one. Have you got maybe 1 or 2, and appreciating that it's going to be nuanced between customers and buyers, but have you got 1 or 2 general silver bullet writing techniques that you always use that have consistently helped the quality of your writing and your bids?
So I think planning it out in advance, sketching out the skeleton response before writing, I think that's got to be the most important thing. And I think, as you said, that goes back to essay writing, thesis writing. Most people who do any writing will plan that out first. There is an element of, okay, just start writing and see what happens. But I think in bid writing, when you're writing for scores, not creative, not being judged on creativity, that planning it out, and it does mean that you won't miss something. And I think there would be a tendency to, if you're just writing because you know about a topic, you tend to sort of miss out the, say, subsection E that you don't actually know the answer to can just be ignored. But by breaking it down and laying it out, this is exactly how we're going to respond to this question. E has a placeholder in at the beginning until somebody in the organisation has got a response to that. So it's that level of planning and I think outlining the question. And then I think in terms of everything else, it's that kind of clarity. Thinking of the mind of the person reading it, shorter sentences, breaks occasionally. I know that sometimes when you've got a page count, the temptation is to close everything up and make it as small as possible. But, if no one's going to read it or be able to digest it, that's not really helping. So, yeah, the clarity, digestibility, short sentences, signposting headings, and being careful of the jargon levels and the complexity levels depending on who you think the evaluator is who's reading it. So again, it could be that it should be written in a very, very complex technical way, but if you don't know who's going to be evaluating it, then that might not be the right approach. So yeah, keeping the language clear, I would say, is probably key.
That's fantastic advice. Thank you. Let's talk about the AI bit now then. So we can't go through, I think, any discussion about bidding at the moment without talking about AI in some way, shape or form. You've already talked a little bit about kind of what AI is doing now and where the opportunities for AI are. There's always been a little bit of this scaremongering, I suppose, in certain corners around AI being a replacement, particularly for bid and proposal writers. Where do you sit on that, and what kind of impacts do you see AI having over the next say 2 to 3 years, is it a risk or is it actually an opportunity for bid and proposal writers?
So I'm going to go positive and say that it's I see it as an opportunity. Personally, I'm not seeing any evidence of it being able to replace bid writing roles at the moment. I think the employment market for bid writers is booming, and that's with the AI tools coming in. So, evidentially, I don't see that as a threat. I think some types of writer, yes, it's definitely a major threat to some types of writing, but not bid writing. But I think that AI tools can strengthen what bid writers can do and open up bid writing to different types of people who may have not been able to do it before. I think obviously we're all still learning. AI tools are changing all the time. What the tools we have can do is changing all the time. But I just find that they're so empowering in terms of supporting that research and that understanding to get yourself to a higher level of understanding before approaching that first workshop or storyboard session is just so instrumental. You can have a much more productive session because you've already got a really strong armor of information in front of you. Obviously it can help sometimes with first drafts, but I wouldn't say that's the strongest point for me. I would say it's the building up to the story. It's the challenging our win themes, and then sort of how we build those into our overall bid, that sort of thing. And then obviously using it for reviews as well.
Yeah.
So helping to evaluate it, really objective reviews. Have we covered off the requirements? AI can do that faster than a human can. And then you need your human reviewers to say, are we telling our company story? Are we differentiating ourselves from our competitors? Because we know the market better than any AI tool will do. So, I think it's playing a really key role in certain aspects of the process. And whilst it will get better, as everybody is going to be using AI tools, you've still got to differentiate yourself. So bid writers are still going to be needed for that. Because if an evaluator gets 8 bids written by AI, they're going to not be a great read, are they? They're not going to necessarily differentiate in terms of tone of voice or style or story. So the bid writers really need to add that layer on top and really push their teams to be thinking of that and prioritizing that in the process. But I think that equally, just generating words will be easier, or it already is easier. So getting the kind of the blank page syndrome will no longer exist. We don't have to worry about staring at a blank page for hours and having to go for a walk to get any inspiration at all, because you can get some words up straight away, but it's a point to move from, not, that is the first draft or a draft, not the polished product. But also I think the risk of that is that because the words that are created by AI will generally sound and read pretty polished, well written, there won't be typos all over it, that kind of thing. It can be convincing that, it sounds great. But actually, when you take a step back and say, but is it really great? Is it really accurate? Is it really telling our story? Is it differentiating us? And the chances are it probably isn't. So that's where it's the human in the loop stays important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. So, Elizabeth, you've taken us on a really great journey here in terms of that bid writers, and more than just writers, very strategic parts of the bid function and the organisation as a whole. And we'll touch in a little bit on some of the work that you're involved in how bid writers can articulate and position that. What I want to do actually is flip it on its head first. So we talked about those kind of organisations that maybe at the moment aren't seeing the true value from their bid writers because they're not allowing them to work in the ways that you've talked about. So what would you say to people in those organisations that they should be looking at doing differently if they want to really support their bid writers and get the most value out of them?
So I think involving them really from when there is a sniff of an opportunity rather than when the bid lands and it's all systems go. And often this will come down to resourcing and allocating more time. But I think time to have your bid writer involved in the process more earlier in the process, but just more of that time will be beneficial.
Yeah.
And to listen to their perspectives and see their questioning as a value and as something important, not as coming from a place of, oh, they don't understand. No, they're asking because if they don't ask, this may not be clear when we then write it to the end audience. So I think it's valuing that and seeing it as different perspectives, different viewpoints, always being valuable in any process. So when I say questioning, our win themes, we may think we have the answer, or we think this about the client. Say, well, I read on LinkedIn that this stakeholder is really concerned about this. Should we not be building that in? They could add some really crucial perspectives into how you approach it. So in terms of what I would say to them, and valuing the role of a bid writer as well, that, even with the end part of that process, that polishing, that differentiating, that tweaking a sentence here and there to get in, to remove a few words that aren't necessary through editing techniques, which may allow an SME to get another couple of sentences in that could be really crucial. All of those are really valuable skills. So I suppose it's valuing the bid writer's input there as well.
Absolutely. And it's hard work, right? It's not easy. I think it would be great for some organizations to perhaps value that as well, the kind of time and resource, as you said, that it takes from us as individuals to actually do the jobs that we do. I don't think that's quite well recognized sometimes.
Yeah.
So you're doing a lot of work, Elizabeth, in your spare time in a voluntary capacity with APMP UK chapter, and specifically the bid writing focus group that they've set up. And through that, I know that you're speaking to various different people, sort of careers advisors, schools, ed tech organisations, about the bid writing part of the profession and making that more visible as a career choice, which it's not quite still at the moment.
No.
I'd be really interested to know, what kind of feedback are you getting from them in those conversations? How do they see the profession at the moment as a career choice for students and graduates? And is there anything more we can be doing as bidding people to help promote it?
So I say that sort of among the audience that I've spoken to, which is often sort of careers advisors in schools, there's sort of a low level of awareness and understanding of the role. And I think probably just out there at large, most of us know, if we speak to somebody just generally in life and you say you're a bid writer, they wouldn't really know what that involved, or certainly have a very limited, they might see it as a technical writer, but they wouldn't really understand it. So it was still quite a niche role compared to, many other professions that people just know what they do. So I would say this audience as well, it's in terms of what we need to push is the sorts of, say, young people that would have the right skills for it. I think that there's a lack of understanding of what, apart from just being good at English, which I always say I think is, actually a very small part of that role. I think previously it would have been, but now with AI tools doing a lot of the heavy lifting around actual words generation and even AI tools for grammar and so on, there's probably no excuse for anybody submitting anything with a typo these days, really. So that part of, I think it's seen more in the editing, writing, polishing role, and this whole strategic part that we've talked about, which is, win themes, developing stories, wouldn't be known about at all. Or the concept of answering a question and structuring it in such a way as to get marks, like doing an exam paper successfully at school. So plenty of students would have that skill and be really good at it, but wouldn't ever relate it to, oh, I'm really good at writing and answering questions. Maybe I could be a bid writer. So that's definitely not on anyone's radar at the moment. So I think also the sectors, some of the feedback is around understanding what sectors employ bid writers, so that if a student showed an interest in a particular sector, they could consider bid writing in that sector as a potential career, which they may not have previously done. And I think that will probably come across is, as I go through more of my EdTech research, my initial observations are that bid writing can be very much tied up together with bid management rather than separated out as a differentiated role and career with its own sort of progression in its own right. But also construction, I would say, is probably more known as a bid writing profession. Whereas, there's lots of other sectors who employ bid writers as well, such as technology, where I work, but lots of others, and maybe that's less known about. So I think there's, lots to do in terms of that awareness. There's what skills are right for the role. There's just selling the role in terms of why it's a good role to do. The employability factor, that there are actually jobs in bid writing. That's a great message, and that's welcome for anybody advising students. You want to advise them on jobs, a job market that's actually buoyant and that exists. And the awareness of the different sectors and the variety within the role. So there's lots of good messages to get out there, and it's just going to be a matter of, working slowly and carefully through those audiences and getting the right messages out to the right people in the right way. And that's what we're going to do.
Amazing. I think the sectors bit, everything's important in that, but the sectors bit definitely resonates with me, because like you've said, I think people would immediately recognize that in that architecture, engineering, construction world, you're probably going to need bidding people, but you may not necessarily realize, like you said, in technology or healthcare for me, legal organizations, etc., you need bid people too. So I definitely agree. That's something that we need to work on strengthening our articulation of.
And also, charities and third sector, you may have young people that are interested in working in that kind of sector, but you've got grant writing and bid writing for them as well, which is, a different side of the coin, but it's still the same skills involved, really. So, I think there's lots of really good information that could be shared with any student who expresses an interest in sort of English, journalism, media, maybe professions that are actually really tough to get into where jobs are reducing, to actually think about bid writing as an alternative. And if we can get that out there, we could definitely attract more young people into it. So, obviously we had the recent survey by the APMP, which showed that out of the respondents, I think only 4% actually chose bid writing as a career. So, so it shows that it's all to play for. You can't do worse than that.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I'm definitely in that other 96%. I don't.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So to round off then, Elizabeth, if we've got, it might be, say, one of our own children or extended member of family, or if we work in education, a student or a career changer, whoever it might be, if we know somebody who is interested in bid writing, is really considering it, what should we tell them? So what kind of skills should we say that they should be focusing on and building to succeed in a bid writer role? What's the best thing that we can say to them to encourage them to get into this profession?
So I would say it's about showing curiosity, and being curious. And I think that's, one of the most important skills is asking questions, being somebody who likes to ask questions and likes to find out how people do things. Yeah, so that sort of that curiosity, problem solving and analytical skills and writing. I think if you've got all of those together, I think if you're purely just a good writer, it's sort of almost getting across that it's more than that. It's writing for a very specific purpose. And if you are a young person, a student, the best way to talk about that is in terms of their essay writing at school.
Yeah.
I mean, my daughter's doing her GCSEs at the moment. She's always talking about her 16 markers for history, where, to get your full 16 marks, you need to, obviously answer the question, show your sources, produce some evidence, give an opinion at the end. And she knows exactly how those 16 marks are made up and how to get them. And I said to her, well, that's really bid writing in a nutshell. So, if you are good at that and you enjoy that and relish that challenge, then I would say that bid writing could be a really good career. And then I think it's getting across the variety and the fact that it's not just purely sitting writing. There is a lot more to it than that in most organisations. You get exposure to a lot of really interesting meetings, exposure to senior people. You do work in a team. It's exciting. I think the perception as well, probably more in the industry than among the audience we're talking about now, but is that kind of burnout, well-being challenge, which is probably out there, might be a reason. It's certainly worried me at the beginning, but I think again that's researching the organisation you're going to work for, and hopefully as an industry we'll improve that anyway. We don't want that to be a feature that's associated with the bid writing role, do we? We want it to be something that people can enjoy and manage. So yeah, working in a team, I think getting across all those good things will help persuade someone into it, and the fact that there are roles available, and that's something a lot of people worry about now, isn't it? That AI will take certain jobs, and I know that graduates a lot of the time are struggling getting roles, and bid writing is out there, so give it a try.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, lovely sentiment to finish us off with, Elizabeth. Thank you very much. We always try and wrap up on the Optimise podcast with a few just quick fire questions at the end. Are you up for doing some quick fire questions?
Yeah, go on then.
Okay, right. So really briefly, what do you think is the biggest myth about bid writing that you want to dispel right now?
I'm going to say that it's just a lonely writer's job and that you sort of work in a silo.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
I would definitely agree with that. What do you think matters most to evaluators? Is it structure or is it storytelling?
That's a tough one because obviously I want to say both. But I would say structure first and story on top. Because if it's badly structured, they're not going to see your story in there. So
actually, that's very true.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Yeah, like that. And last one, if you could give us all just that one sentence that we can use to describe why bid writing is a great career option, what's that sentence?
So one sentence. So I think if you like writing and problem solving, and your brain being challenged, and being busy, then there are lots of job opportunities and this could be a very good career for you.
Oh, love that. Love that. That's definitely getting clipped up out of this. I can tell you that right now. Fantastic. Elizabeth, thank you. It's been really, really insightful. I know everyone's going to get so much out of this. So I'm going to reflect on a couple of key takeaways here for me, and hopefully these resonate with everybody else. I've definitely learned that we can pull that bid and proposal writer role much earlier into the process. Get involved as early as we can in capture, in solutioning, bring that into our storyboarding. And that's going to help us so much more than just having to be involved when the writing actually starts. And the conversation that we had around AI on both sides of the fence, again, definitely resonated, and some of that really rich stuff there about particularly how we might bid right for AI evaluation and it actually not being too dissimilar to what we do today. I think that's really important. And then what we've just talked about there around how we bring new people and fresh blood into the profession by articulating what we do as a really strategic pillar of the organisation. I really, really liked that. So, Elizabeth, if people want to learn a little bit more from you, or for example, they want to find out a little bit more about some of the work that you're doing with the APMP UK bid writing group, where can they go to access that?
I would say the best thing to do would be to find me on LinkedIn and connect with me there, and I'll be very happy to sort of have a chat with anybody who wants to find out more, particularly if you want to volunteer for the in the bid writing group and support me on any of my sort of projects around education. That would be fantastic. It doesn't need to be a lot of time, but just, the odd hour here and there could really be helpful. So just find me on LinkedIn and connect, and we'll go from there.
Fantastic. Elizabeth, thanks again ever so much. Really appreciate you coming on and joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It was great.
No problem. And thanks everybody for listening as well. This has been the Optimise podcast, brought to you by VisibleThread. I hope to see you again next time.
You've been listening to the Optimise podcast from VisibleThread. A special thank you to our host, Matt Light, for bringing his experience and passion for the bidding profession to the series. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe wherever you're listening to stay up to date with future episodes and series from industry experts. Thanks for listening.